hope you're ready because Hogwarts Legacy copies are officially out in the wild, which means the next week is likely going to become very interesting. Also a ton of new gameplay reveals and interviews to talk about, new mount footage, and much more. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for the amazing support over the past few weeks. To show my appreciation, I'm giving away another copy of Hogwarts Legacy Deluxe Edition, so 2 giveaways right now. As always, you just have to be sub to the channel, leave a like and comment down below, and the winners will be announced in the week before launch. Now let's get started with a brand new footage of the majestic Hippogriff mount, one of our trusty companions that we'll get to rescue at some point in the main story. Now the game actually features 2 of these, one acquired from the story, which is the white one, and the second Onyx Hippogriff that you get from pre-ordering the game. At the current time, there's no official info if there's any difference between these, besides maybe the color and likely being able to get the pre-order one a bit faster when first starting out the game. And I would imagine gameplay-wise, there's not going to be much of a difference either. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the Thestral, which I was still kind of keeping hopes high there would be an in-game variant of at some point. But after asking the official support page, they did confirm that there's no other means to unlock another Thestral through normal gameplay. Instead, you either have to buy the deluxe edition or buy the pack separately once the game launches. Though I would argue there's still reasons for you to get deluxe anyway, for the extra dark arts cosmetics, the arena, and especially the 72-hour early access. Speaking of early access, it's wild to think that Hogwarts Legacy copies have already been spotted out in the wild, and with such an anticipated release, I just don't think the street date will last long before being broken. God of War Ragnarok had a notoriously tight embargo, and still, copies already got out over a week in advance. Good news though, if you do play on Steam early with the Deluxe Edition and only have 1 copy and are also on a tighter budget, 1 copy is enough for family sharing to benefit from the 72-hour early access. This means that if you have a friend or a sibling, both of you can play via family share and still both benefit from the early release. And speaking of that, the embargo for content creators also lifts when the early access starts, so February 7th as well, which means, yeah, expect walkthroughs and gameplay to drop starting that date. By the way, if you want to play even earlier than that, then the New Zealand trick is still likely going to be your best friend. For PC and Xbox, it's pretty much easy since you can use a VPN or just change your country or region to New Zealand and get like an 8-hour advantage. For PlayStation users, it's a bit more complicated as it requires both creating a New Zealand account and buying the game via the New Zealand PlayStation Network, but you only have to do that once and you'll be able to do this for all future releases. Anyway, we have a lot more info coming our way from the Hogwarts Legacy advanced game designer over at Avalanche Studio, who did shed a bit more light on how certain things will work in the game. On the subject of season changes and how the passage of time is represented, he mentions that the passing of seasons works exactly as seen in the films and the books. This means that it's closely linked to the narrative, and as the story progresses, a new season begins in which a new one is inaugurated. So yeah, I'm totally expecting to maybe start the game towards the end of the summer, then transition into autumn, then winter, and then spring before maybe the game finishing off with summer all over again. He also had to say this about another important aspect, which is how house choices will influence your gameplay. So it seems that there will be indeed effects on certain missions, others on the setting, which I'm not sure if it's translated correctly, maybe on the ambience. I'm getting a second translation on it as well, but he does mention that in general this is going to be very important which house you do choose. We also know that different houses will have different side quests you can go and like get and complete, and likely unique rewards attached to them, hence why the game supports so many, well, separate character save files, so you can go ahead, have a ton of replayability and create other characters for other houses in mind. But moving on in terms of story difficulty, as I know there were a few of you guys asking me this, yeah, we got more info also via another content creator who goes by the name of Tiffany Dalton, so I'm gonna link her channel down below. But she did play on the story mode, and there's a couple of other differences that I saw when replaying her gameplay. And a couple of other changes I noticed was the fact that countering enemies is a lot more forgiving than some of the higher difficulties, plus your character will take significantly less damage from combat spell attacks. This on top of the fact that minigames on story mode cannot fail, plus the puzzles won't be time sensitive on that mode, which should make for a pretty relaxed experience for those who don't want much of a challenge. Great to hear though is that you deal still about the same damage as on the other difficulties, so victories should still feel earned, which I think is a nice balance even if you do go on the lower difficulties. Now, a slightly more controversial view I've seen over the past few days, and especially since the recent previews got published, is that some people felt that NPCs seemed a bit too static in some of the released footage. But after my time spent with the game, doing quite a bit more on top of what I was able to record, I can definitely tell you that this game has by far the least static or boring NPCs I've seen so far. Literally every single place I went into had tons of students doing something at all times. Some were practicing their spells, others were playing different wizarding sports, others were practicing their skills. Most of them also engaged in conversations, moved around, and did a whole bunch of stuff that, I've seen some of the other gameplay footage that I did not even know there were those interactions in the game. Many even made remarks about their own achievements or the player achievements before moving on, and this just covers the bare minimum of it. You will constantly see students fly by, and by the way, also random events happening, including the one with Peeves messing around with students. It's only one example, but there's many more that trigger in certain areas at specific times by just going by, and even Peeves will appear in other areas too. Furthermore, the game's designer confirmed Hogwarts is full of interactions, and their goal was to make the school a living element of the world. Just wandering the corridors, you come across many puzzles that require to use the right spell at the right time for them to be solved. I don't want to give too many spoilers, he says, but I guarantee there is a lot to discover, specifically when talking about the castle. Furthermore, I think it became more clear to everyone that spells don't have just one use, and instead tons of environmental interactions and uses as well. What we saw is just a glimpse, but lots of puzzles and exploration elements will require you to use lots of your spells. The same interview mentions that it was very important if it was decided to add a particular spell, that spell should be able to be exploited in a whole bunch of different ways. Precisely for that reason, the game world offers several opportunities to solve all the little secrets that they scattered around, so that sounds really cool to me. Now, on a more technical related note, but despite recent delays for the old gen and Switch versions, the game still will drop on the Steam Deck on its regular date, which is February 7th or 10th, depending if you get the deluxe edition or not, with the official support account confirming that the game will be Steam Deck verified on launch day. For the other handheld variant, even though the Switch version has been pushed back to July 23rd, devs still confirm they are doing everything in their power to make sure it's both beautiful and well optimized for all platforms, and that the Switch version is going to be awesome. Now, of course, we're gonna wait for that and see how it pans out, and the reviews should be a lot more telling, but expect the next week ahead of launch to be very interesting, to say the least. Of course, expect a lot more Hogwarts Legacy content here on this channel, early access gameplay, of course all spoiler free, but even more so a lot more guides once the game launches. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.